Hey everyone, Tom Black here. Super excited. I'm your host for True Life with Tom show, episode number 5. And we're joined by the incomparable Demetri, is it Stakias?
Stakias.
Stakias, who is also a fellow podcaster, fellow real estate entrepreneur, someone that I value as a person, as a friend, and as an entrepreneur. So, Dimitri, share a little bit about what's going on in your life and your journey, and let's get right into it.
Well, Tom, thank you for having me on your show. As you mentioned, I'm also a real estate investor and a podcaster. So our company is called Real Estate Relief. We talk to homeowners in different levels of distress and offer them solution that can get them relief. And relief may involve moving on from their situation and selling their property to people with integrity who will take care of them every step of the transaction and support them in that next journey that they need to take. The Relief Podcast is the podcast I host, and we talk to different notable leaders. You're definitely going to be welcome on the show anytime you can book that availability. But I like to share stories. I like to talk to people and kind of get to know them. A lot of the people I've met firsthand. Um, there's certain guests that are uh, have a larger following than others, and some people just it's a wonderful conversation. And as you're going to see when you continue this journey of being in podcasting, it's not always smooth, it's not always effortless, but people love in the world of podcasting when people are open and vulnerable. We want relatable characters. So let's say in the world of real estate, I've been near foreclosure a few times because of economic difficulties, and recessions, of tenant issues. So when I call someone, when I talk to them, when they call me, I get it. I actually get it. It's not like I heard it from you or I heard it from others or I saw it on a podcast. It's like I lived this. When you live in that mud, you know how to talk to someone on a belly to belly basis. And I imagine in your case, it's like we all have stories of how we've all helped people, and I think that motivates us and inspires us to continue doing this to serve people, not because we're different characters in the real estate game. We're in it for ourselves, but we're actually in it for others first.
Absolutely. One of the things that we've talked about many times is, coming from that place of service. And I know for a fact in my entrepreneurial career, I wasn't always that guy. And as I got older and wiser and learned from people like you and others, I'm like, if you, and Zig Ziglar put it best, he's one of our favorites. You know exactly what I'm going to say. When you help enough people get all that they want out of life, you will get all that you want out of life. And unfortunately, in today's um, attention driven society, focusing on me is happening a little more than ever before. Am I right?
We are in a selfish society that it lacks. I'm not saying I'm just speaking generally, but in many pockets lacks community, being community minded. Like
Mm,
as you could tell in the last few years, there's obviously we have to survive, right? So if if things get bad, we have to think of our families first. But once our immediate needs are met, we can't just say, "Well, I'm good," or "My needs are met," or "I got this under control." Well, what about your neighbor?
hmm
You know what I mean? And that's kind of why we get into this business. That if things get ignored long enough, then people fall into a crisis, a job
Right.
loss, a family loss, a health issue, right? And maybe they don't even know their neighbors anymore. So let alone, hey, I'm suffering. So who are they going to call? They're going to typically talk to the sharks of this business, right? The people who call live on Facebook and they're running through their scripts and they're quoting Grant and NEPQ and all these high tech. And look, we all study them. We know how it's done, but we know that the best thing is to be yourself.
Right.
When you talk to that seller, when you talk to that homeowner, or even all the other people in this business, we have to respect them equally. The insurance person, the mortgage person, you got to be timely. You got to be responsive. We do, and they do. And if they don't, tell them, please be more responsive, or I can't work with you.
Sure.
Like, just get right to it. See, I think I think we're all kind of like stones that get pushed through the tumbler of life, and we're smoothing out because those rough edges, they get us caught up in things.
Sure,
But the smooth
sure.
stone just rolls right through the river, and on to the next challenge, and which in our case is not a challenge but an opportunity and a blessing.
Right, right. No doubt. And it's what brought us together, how we connected. We've been connected on Facebook for years and, have similar philosophies on many things. And I've seen some of your podcast episodes and love them. I did want to ask you, what inspired you to do it? Because I want to share the same with you. So, what inspired you to start podcasting?
I I think it was time to, I guess, shift from a consume mentality to a create mentality. So now I consume to create. So I think over our decades of just life experience, we acquire a lot of wisdom, right? And then why should it just kind of go to waste, or why should only a handful of our inner circle kind of know our brilliance? Why don't we share that light with the world? Why don't we go there and have, like, I get to have I get the privilege, and I'm grateful for it, to talk to people who otherwise aren't available. Like if I ask for 5 minutes of a certain person, it's hard to get. But if I ask for 20 minutes or an hour on a podcast, all of a sudden, oh yeah, I know what a podcast is. Some people will study your numbers and they'll say, well, you don't have quite the viewership I need. Okay, well, that might not be the right fit for you anyway. But then someone says, "Oh, you have a show? I'll be on your show." They just know that all publicity is good publicity. As long as
Right,
you resonate well, as long as you're here to support each other. Like I said, there's enough room for everyone to win. We're in different markets, but if we have a deal here in Philadelphia, you think I can't bring a buyer to the deal because it's not my deal? That zero sum mentality needs to end in our real estate business. Like, some people, I only bring the buyer when I have the listing. Excuse me? Are you not going to serve your buyers' needs? If this is the one house that fits them perfectly, but will only give you a 3% commission instead of the 4 or 4.5% commission if you listed it, why are you not serving that person? Right?
right,
You really want to create a career where this is what you're known for, right? And then people will say whatever they want online, but then you meet certain people, and I could say just like two words like Mike McCann, and right away that's a great guy. Like I meet with him 2 weeks ago, and this is a shining star, a person who doesn't even have to do this business anymore, right? And I talked to him the week before he went for open heart surgery. Okay, he's recovering now. He's well, and pray for him. And we'll all keep him in prayers. But this is a strong, ebullient, happy leader. And I just sat in his office having espresso. What would he gain from me joining his office? Probably a lot. But just by being a person for 5 or 10 minutes, leveling out, closing out the world and all the distractions and dings and demands of our time, and say, you know what? We're here for each other. How can we talk? How can we connect? And how can we be there for each other? So humanity needs that. There's been too
right,
much division in the last many years, not just the last four, last 12 out of the 16, if not even further, when you go back decades and decades.
right.
We are, as believers, right? As believers in God, depending on any version of Christianity you follow, in its essence, we can't hate each other. We can make distance with each other. You can hate the sin that people perform, but we're kind of ordered not to hate. So for me, it's been this exercise of emotional maturity, putting in
Right.
that work, and say, you know what, this triggered something in me. Why did it trigger something in me? And I'm not saying I'm completely infallible, but maybe I'm a little slower to react, right? And better to respond. Now,
Right.
again, this is just an exercise. I'm not saying I'm like I hit that perfection level, but you know, I feel like as you get older, you get a little bit wiser, and but then you also get younger too, in that you're more carefree, right? You're gonna speak from your mind, right? But not callously, carefully,
Right.
framing it. I don't want to just give you unsolicited advice unless you're ready to hear it. Right? Is it okay to give you advice? Is it okay to tell you something, or are you good? Because if you're good, I don't need to throw anything on your plate that you may not be ready to catch. Because sometimes we're people pleasers. We want to help, And so you're like, Tom, I know you need help with this. And you're like, it's not what I need help with. It's like, thanks, but
Right.
no thanks. So, like, if I may ask you, like, is there anybody that you would love one day to interview, or any type of leader that might be on your dream list?
Wow. That's a good question. There are probably a couple of people. And you threw me off here because I really hadn't thought about that. Um, but um, right now, I'm interviewing friends and associates and entrepreneurs in my circle, and sometimes we think, okay, well, let's just stay in our little circle, our little bubble, because it's comfortable, and we talked about it's a safe space. I think Gary Vaynerchuk would be one person. Tony Robbins. I think Brian Tracy's. Is he still with us? I'm not sure.
Absolutely, he's
Um,
with us. Oh my God,
yes,
I would cry the day he died. But I would love to, in fact, I know people who could get you Brian,
right,
right? See, see, that's all you have to ask, right?
right.
And so I
And
would think on a
that's
priority scale, I would put him top of the scale, not just because he's on the older side of life, but because of all those decades of wisdom.
well, I've been listening to him for decades. I
Oh,
was first introduced to Brian Tracy back. I had to be 23, maybe. So, and then I literally listened to him last night. I caught something on Instagram, I believe, and he basically says, right before you go to bed, set your intention for the next day. Hey, I'm going to have a terrific day tomorrow. I'm going to have a terrific day tomorrow, and then change your state. So when you drift off into sleep, he said, well, first thing when you wake up in the morning, I feel terrific. It's going to be a great day. And so, to many people who are caught in the programming, it seems absolutely ridiculous, right? But energy is everything. The intention you bring into a conversation, the joy you bring into a conversation will show just as much as the fear and the anger you bring to it. Am I right?
oh, absolutely. And I grew up on a lot of his concepts, the psychology of achievement. Everyone, like when people say they stand on the shoulders of giants, the giant isn't Tony Robbins. He stands on the shoulders of Brian Tracy, of Jim Rohn, of Zig Ziglar, like all these people who preceded, and then they just add their layers. Just
Mm-hmm.
like if you go to Jerusalem and you dig, you're going to see churches underneath churches, right? You're building on that rock. Like literally, obviously, you can go further back into Peter and the rock of this church and how we build the faith. But when I look at Brian's work, the psychology of self discipline, I was inspired in, for instance, like a quick story, 2009, King of Prussia, he's coming to town. Right now, mind you, we're in the middle of this like recession. People aren't earning that much money. How much is a session to come see Brian for the day? $500. Oh, it's 500. Like, I could afford it, but it was a big bite back then. And I asked right away. I said, "Would you accept any volunteers? Can I volunteer for the day? Meaning, if I volunteer, I figure I'll get some value." So I said, "Yeah, okay. What time you want me to be there?" 7 a.m. You got it. Guess what time I show up? And Brian,
6:45.
exactly 6:45. Because according to Brian, that's on time, right? If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, don't even bother, right?
Good
That's what he said.
job.
Right. So I go there and I say, okay, what can I do for you? They send me to Staples. I said, okay, what do you need? Oh, we need these plastic slide project. He was doing slide projections back then with black marker and all to illustrate his point, just like I did in grade school. When teaching
Right.
them how to share something, that's how they did it. That's how they, instead of the big whiteboards that you see today that are all computerized and half the time don't work. So I go to Staples. I get about $50 of supplies. I bring it back. I said, okay, what else do you need? All right, you don't need anything. I'll go in there and enjoy your day. What? I got this day for 90% off? Yeah, okay, cool. Right? And I get to meet Brian and I get to have a couple minutes with him. Like, come on, this just win. And now, mind you, I did not communicate, like, as Brian would write in the book, speak to win. I did not speak to win when speaking to him, but I did speak. So, right. So
Right.
I have a podcast so I can speak better because I have social anxiety, approach anxiety. I used to stutter, which is sometimes still painful to talk. but I know that there's a lot of good things to say. And if
Right.
I can inspire and encourage anybody to aspire to speak more, hit that record button and say their message, then I did something good. So,
See, I didn't know that, and that's one of the things you mentioned, you talked about earlier, is about being vulnerable. One of the things I love about some of the podcasts that I've seen in any number of versions is these people, individuals, are talking about anything and everything and what they feel and what they experienced in 1984 or whatever day or year it was and whatever event happened, right? And so I feel an energy connection to you in a different way because I've had self-worth challenges, not necessarily challenges with specifically what you mentioned, but it's like I know I can lead, but I'm hesitant to lead. I believe I'm a leader, and at the same time, I question if anyone wants to follow me, and that's my own stuff, right? And I've got a YouTube channel with 750 people on it, and I've got one that I just started with, so it's only got 30 some, and then I've got 4,000 Facebook friends, and I belong to 900 Facebook groups, and I have thousands of followers on other state platforms, and all of that said, many people have commented on what I've thought, and then over time, I started sharing less. So that's why the reason I created the podcast is I see my role and I think I can lead quietly. And this is what I'm thinking is that this is a great way to be a quiet leader who gets a voice over time.
yeah, and like I said, everyone talks about like the alpha male and the beta male, and what about the sigma male, or what about the emotionally mature gentleman who knows how to talk tough, knows how to handle things if things go bad, but for the most part is very mature and even-handed.
Hmm.
Right? So people need to see that. They need to see that side of you, not just the post, not just your images, not just where you just last hung out, but just this moving image of you, right?
Right.
And as you evolve, as these episodes progress, people will go into episode 5 and say, "Oh, look how Tom's talked in episode 5, and look how he's grown in episode 20, and look at the caliber of guests he's able to have, and the questions, and the depth, and the profoundness that comes out." And you're like, "Whoa!" And if you don't believe it, just like I said, 1 year, kind of see your future episode and then come back to this one and say, wow, look at
Yeah.
the growth. Look what I got to do. Right. And it's chronicled. Right. And then once people get to know you on episode 20, guess what? They'll tune into this episode and they'll come back and say, what more does he have? And what more can I learn? Right. And so people have this never ending thirst and hunger for information. But we need to learn. And here's a tidbit for you is to cut up into segments, right? Like this is something I just started adapting with recent episodes. Is people may not have an hour or two right away to hear the whole thing. They
Right.
they have all these other obligations on their time. So maybe a 2 minute segment of what moves them the most and what's going to fire up their day or get them out of the stuck circle they're in. We did something good. And if it
Right.
ends up coming back to us in a deal, if it ends up coming to us in a connection or somewhere where we can serve, it's all good. I said, we know that we're not chasing $1 billion a year, but you know what? A million's not bad.
Right.
Yep. And see, a million in our hands isn't so that we can, show off with Rolls Royces and beachfront homes.
Sure.
It's so that we can actually do some good, not just for our families, but our communities.
Yeah.
And then you're inspiring other people in this business to do good, help the
Right.
homeless, help, Boys and Girls Club, any kind of cause that inspires you, that needs support. We need to support it.
Sure.
We can't just
Sure.
sit here idle and say, well, let them take care of it. Well, who's them? It's us. And again, I don't want to go too political, but
We
America,
call it the village. I call it the village.
the village, look, the village, again, when, Hillary said it takes a village to raise a person, she actually was right. It, I just don't want her to lead that village.
Right.
Right? She could be in that village, but, when you think about when Trump was serving McDonald's French fries for whatever 15 minutes more than his opponent, um, in Ben Salem, in local place. this couple comes in there, right? And there was Indian immigrants, and everyone has their struggles. My father had his struggles as an immigrant from Greece, just earning his way, building his business. And these people go in there and say, "Oh, Mr. Trump, we're just ordinary people." He stopped right away. He says, "You are not ordinary." Right? Taking the same words that were just given to him, flipping the script and throwing right back at them with positivity, with a happy emotion, a true happy meal experience. Again, not don't eat the food, but,
No.
but I'll take the happy service, right? And instantly, this person connected on a heart level.
Hmm.
Okay, so this is more effective than an ad because you connected with two people who might have a big family, a lot of cousins, and a lot of people that they touch every day. And what do you think they'll do from that point on forward?
Sure.
This is a
Sure.
great guy. He's a mensch, right?
Right.
And worth mentioning, right? Somebody
Sure.
who stands up, who serves, and like I said, those are the leaders we want to look up to,
Sure.
right? In a time
Sure.
like
And
today.
again, that's where I getting back to what you said earlier, we are all sinners and there is no level of sin. So, just because you're only an alcoholic and that person's addicted to something else, that doesn't make you a better addict than them or a better sinner. And so, politicians, celebrities, us, we're all making mistakes. But at the same time, I call it common unity. If we can find common unity, we can build our community. It's the same letters.
It is, and I mean, if you
And
want, it's like communion in Christ.
right,
We're one body, right? We're all linked. Our souls don't have covers. Those labels of identity and stuff that doesn't mean anything. In heaven,
right.
we're all the same, right? This is just one spirit under God.
And we
And
all bleed the same.
mm,
Um, and then the other thing that I wanted to ask you is in on your podcast journey, um, you had mentioned some of the challenges that you face in life. How has the podcast made you a better entrepreneur or person?
I'll start with person.
Okay.
It's being like quick in the moment. It's being super present with people who maybe years ago I couldn't even have a sentence with. But I put so much effort into personal development that I get to show up as this individual, right? You get to meet the 2025 Demetri because last year's Demetri was a little bit on the ropes, but now I'm back in the middle of the fight, back in the
Right.
arena, ready to go.
Okay.
So you'll see this growth. You'll see this. Like I said, it's just all about the repetition. It's just like the gym. You can't go once. You got to go on some regularity. Like you mentioned, how often to have an episode. I say if you can do once a week, or stick to releasing once a week, then people consistently know you. There's something they can rely on. And if you pick a day, let's say it's Tuesday, every Tuesday, tune in because Tom Black is dropping another episode. And you need to listen to it because he only brings on people that he connects with. Right?
Right.
And you could take that soundboy and roll with it and say, look, these are the kind of people we're going to bring on our show.
Sure.
You tune on
Sure.
in and suggest other great people who might also be welcome on this show.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you're asking the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. And one of the things I'm going to reflect on and take away as an aha moment for me is I'm actually going to, after I do every episode, I'm going to go and watch the previous one and notice the dynamics and the change and the shift in energy from this moment forward because I haven't been aware, right? I've just been kind of doing it and enjoying it, but from this moment forward, I'm going to realize that this was a tipping point. And every episode after this one is just going to be different.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
certainly.
not I'm not the same after this
Oh,
today
I'm
with you.
so happy. I mean, think about it. So here's a telling example for me, right? I had this episode in March recorded with David Meltzer, right? And he only gives you like 20 minutes because he's a busy guy. But I couldn't reach out to him and say that from your side there was an echo. There was an echo all throughout the episode on his side, not my side. I don't want to blame him, but I also don't want to
Right.
ask to recast the episode because it was actually so good. So I
Right.
finally found the right person, and he edited, and he got rid of the echo. But I hear myself talk, and I'm like, wait, I don't recognize me. That's not me. That's not me. That's somebody else
Right.
talking there. Look at that. There's some rocks in his mouth. Like I would be a little smoother today. Like let's have that interview again this year, and in fact,
Right.
it'll be better. So I kind of need to preface to say, hey, you know what? This episode was recorded in March. So if you think that there's a little inconsistency in my voice, it's because of when it was recorded, rather than my feelings and my emotions that day.
Sure.
So you'll feel that, right? And you'll bring the power and you'll bring the emotion. And then sometimes like, gosh, it's that podcast is scheduled in the middle of the day and you have all this other stuff to do. So you set that aside and you still smile because you got to be here.
Right.
Like I said, we made this commitment a few weeks ago. I held to it. It would have been better to be in person, but the things get busy.
Sure.
But
Sure.
we'll have another episode, and you can be a guest on my show, and I
That
can
would be
drive down.
great.
I can drive down to you, and it's all the same to me.
Or I can come up and get a Philly cheesesteak
Come on up. I
because
mean,
I don't know what the best cheesesteak is in Philadelphia. You do.
all right. So best cheesesteak for your audience is a place called Joe's
Okay.
on Girard and Frankfurt. It originally was open on Torresdale Avenue, and it was known by a word when it first opened in the 40s that cannot be used today because it refers to Asian Americans and their eyes.
Okay.
It was called Chinks, but that word was the name of the white person who opened it because he had small eyes. Again, words
Okay.
that didn't seem like they were offensive are terribly
Right.
offensive today.
Or it wasn't his intention at the time at all.
Right, right. It was just
Right.
more like as a
Understood.
descriptor, like somebody has a big
Right.
nose or a long
Right.
chin, right? Like
Right.
Jay Leno. Nobody seems he's not offended if you make fun of his chin, but again, different times, different things, and it's
Oh
all
yeah.
about how things are interpreted. So we
Hmm.
want, like I said, this nice, wonderful food. Let's go to Joe's. It's on the corner of Girard and Frankfurt. It used to be a Greek diner. I tried to buy that place. Okay, I went into that diner in like 2010, and I said, guys, I want to buy this. Walgreens is telling me they want, they might want this, and I'll offer you like 700 grand. And they're like, no, we want to keep this diner open because, the grandkids are going to college and they might not like the jobs. And so they might want to work in the diner. I'm like, you're going to make them work in the diner? Apparently they didn't because they sold a couple of years later. It just
Right.
wasn't to me, right? Because,
Right.
sometimes you don't want to sell to your own people. You want to sell to an outsider for a little more money. Again,
Okay.
whatever works for you, right? Sometimes people will sell their properties to us. Other times they'll reach out to that hedge fund or that private equity firm or somebody who they think will pay them more. But then there's more paperwork. Then there's more red tape. Then there's some surprise charge or an inspection or maybe last minute they can't buy the house, right? And they don't care because they're just running by portfolios and spreadsheets. Well, you sit there and say, you know what? You have how many years in this business of real estate? Do you have
20.
20 years? There
Mhm.
aren't that many people who last 20 years. And there's a lot of people who say they've done it for 20 years, but just being an active licensed agent doesn't mean anything. It's how active you are, how plugged in you are. And to me, I don't size you up on activity. I size you up on the stories. Like share a quick story, if you would, uh, of a family that you helped, like transition from suffering to some type of relief because they sold their property to you.
Okay, well, I'm getting chills and goosebumps already. I'm going to tell you the story, and it was the most difficult thing that I've ever experienced as maybe as a person in my life. And it's a feel good story at the end of the day. Okay. So, a friend of mine, Sean Sargent, fellow real estate investor, uh, um, lived here in Maryland. I think he's since moved to Florida, but he had a seller in Delaware who wanted to sell her father's home in Newcastle. I went there. Sherry and I we're walking up the sidewalk to meet the. I think she was the PR for the estate, and then she had a brother and a sister. We walk up to shake her hand, and smoke is billowing out of the kitchen window, billowing out of the kitchen window. Her brother is there as well, tries to go around the back door to get in, can't get in, tries to go in the front door, can't get in. They call the authorities. The house is fully engulfed. Minutes later, they show up, and the seller's sister and dog expired in the fire while we were standing on the curb. So my wife and I stayed by her side for over an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, to just feel with her. And she never forgot it. We went away from that moment. Obviously, the house is damaged severely. Um, she has another house she wants us to sell. So I don't hear from her for, I don't know, maybe a month or so. And I check on her, 30 days later. Hey, thinking about you. You're in my prayers. You okay? Yes, I'm okay. My husband and I own another house in Delaware. We want to sell that. I said, okay, great. We got that done in 35 days, done and sold for exactly what she wanted for it, exactly the price she asked for. I didn't negotiate. She said, I know I could probably get X if I listed it. Can you get me Y? I did. The buyer paid us a nice fee to get it done. And then shortly after that, we sold the house that had burned out for her as well. And shortly thereafter that, she did the most beautiful YouTube testimonial with me. We did like an interview like this together. And she told me how, how much that meant to her. And she'll never forget it. We couldn't leave. But we were at the house and this was happening, and the fire people put it out, and they took her out and all the stuff that went on. We just couldn't leave. So I would like to say that was a turning point for me in my life, in real estate and life in general, is that sometimes you just have to be present, like you said, and be of service, because at that moment in time there was no longer an income opportunity for me, but my humanity kicked in. And because I love my boy Sean, who's also a believer in God and Christ and a follower, and someone I love and respect, he's been a Facebook friend of mine for like 5 years. I've never met him. Since that really horrific event, beauty has come from it. Sean got 2 checks and never left the comfort of his home. And so thank you for letting me share. I
Well, that
just
was beautiful.
it just came to me, and I'm like, she's a doctor, she's a PhD, so she's a therapist. So she treats people who are dealing with trauma, and then she has this, right? But anyway, my I just hope anyone that heard what I just said, it was a beautiful, as we look now, wish it hadn't happened, but a lot of beauty and love came out of that tragedy.
I mean, we're called to serve, right? In that moment, you're called to serve, right? You had that option to say, well, it's not my problem. It's somebody else's problem, and I got something else to do, and maybe this is too much, and we got family obligations. Or you can sit there and say, you know what, like, what would the Lord do? Are you going to let that person just kind of drown in their despair? Or are you going to, as Simon Sinek said, sit in the mud with them, right? And if it took 2 hours, so be it. You probably would have sat there till 4 hours or 8 hours or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
until they feel like they can breathe again,
Right,
right? And feel like, okay, well, tomorrow's another day. Things happen in the world that we can't understand, and it's in God's hands, right?
right,
Like even just being that friend, or even just having that compassionate smile, and
right.
you know, I can see it in your face. Like I said, that this is like a like a loved one. And I can imagine this is why you do what you do.
Right, right. Well, I'm a lover of humanity and just want to do better at loving myself. If there's anything I can be vulnerable about today, is um, that self-care is a priority, and I'm making it more of a priority every day because I can shine a bigger, better, and brighter light if I give myself a break.
That's necessary because I think we're so tough. So I'll speak for myself on this one. I think I've done a lot of that, what they call the shame, blame, guilt cycle, right? And you look in the mirror and you forget self-love, no love, negative self-worth, right? So
Hmm.
that's why people pour their fortunes into personal development to seek validation from people who mostly don't care about them.
Well,
Ooh, ooh, okay, now
well,
we went there.
there's some truth to that. What I believe that there are some thought and mindset masters or leaders that I value their opinion. Um, um, I don't know how they handle the energy exchange. You know,
Yes.
sometimes you go to a concert and there's 100,000 people singing your song, or there's 20,000 people hearing your message. How do we not get just absolutely exploding with joy in those moments in time, right? And so, um, you know, I'm just grateful I had the opportunity to be there and be present in that moment, right? And she and I are, different people, and she comes from a different background, demographic than me, but just one of the most beautiful human beings. And I talked to her on the phone before we met. Couldn't have been nicer. And after about like I said, about an hour and a half, 2 hours, she insisted that we would leave. She said, "You need to go get some dinner. I'm okay. Thank you. Love you guys. Appreciate it." You know, and so now, and when I go into any new conversation, what ends up happening, somebody says something about what's going on in their world, and then I want to figure out what do they need. So what do you need in your podcasting business? What do you need or
Oh,
want?
what I need? I probably need accountability to make sure I do it every week, right? I probably
Okay,
need to be like, hey, are you sticking on the schedule? Like, you don't have to call me, just text me. Like, are you
I'm
sticking to
gonna
your
write it
schedule?
down.
There you go. And I could send you the same message. Be like, so you did mention before the podcast that weekly sounds good. Or do we have any reason why we can or cannot stick to that plan?
Right.
And again, that's all. Without going into any details or comparison or whatever. But and look, if we miss a step, it doesn't mean we missed all the steps, right? That just go back up. Like you said, forgiveness is divine, right?
Hmm.
It's our task to kind of aspire to the divine, right? Not replacing God, but kind of aspiring to be like Christ, and
Right.
um, not hiding our faith, right? In early Christianity, people, if they hid their faith, it was because they're afraid of their life. And I say, whoever is afraid to lose their life loses it. And whoever is not afraid to lose their life will gain it. So, we don't have things to lose because all we have is our reputation. If we don't do that next deal, it's okay. I'm not going to like, I let's say this year I pick up the agent hat again. I would never talk to a seller and say, I'll accept this inflated value for your listing so I can secure the listing. Knowing very well that all the training has taught me that in 2 weeks I will come to you and say, this price isn't working. You need to lower the price. Like, no, just speak up straight. Say, look, I hope you work with me, but if not, I understand. But this is where the price has to be. And you might think of me later, you might think of me now, but just like this is kind of where it needs to be. And if you accept that, that's good. If not, then it may not sell. And if it does, I really hope it does, and you prove me wrong. But like I'm thinking for myself. If this were my property, this is where kind of I would price it, because the purpose is to get it sold, not just to have it on the market, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And the same thing with your assignment deals. If you're like, what, it's August, everyone's on vacation, and not too many people are buying, so that price that we were hoping to get is not going to really happen. So if there's a little bit of flexibility, maybe there's some of these other investors who are in the middle of their summer vacation will step in. But I don't know about you, but my goal this year is to step into more of my own deals, and probably all of
Right,
them, because I don't want to have to beg someone that, hey, this is a great deal, buy it. And you're like, well, I don't know, the moon's not lined up, my wife's yelling at me, like all these things that aren't
yeah,
even excuses. They're just reasons
right,
to close the phone and move on to the next caller.
right.
But we have to keep smiling through all the challenges in our business. And one thing I want to ask you is where do you see your local market going this year in real estate?
Well, I like to refer to Baltimore Metro because that's more of the local market. I don't live specifically in Baltimore, but one of the things that's happened in Baltimore in the last 20 years is that prices have gone up exponentially, but it's still one of the cheapest cities in the country. Um, and so the advantage that Baltimore has over many other metropolitan areas is the DC corridor, and there are tons of jobs between Baltimore and Washington. And so the Baltimore Washington markets are rarely impacted by market shifts or significantly impacted, right? So I think that gentrification, renovations, high density housing, all that's on the table for Baltimore and that city in particular, because it's already in process. It's already happening. I have an example. I could tell you. In 2021, I sold 5 properties for $350,000. Five row homes, if you will, or townhouses, 3 bedroom townhouses. Um, they're all worth close to $1 million today combined.
So
And
is
so
that a lesson?
I look at it
There's a
from a
lesson there.
wholesaler, and a wholesaler, I made, $22,500, which is a good day for most people, right? But if I had borrowed 75,000, I'd have 600,000 in equity right now and cash flow.
That's a lesson, and I think for all of us, and especially to the person who's hesitant to buy that deal. So let's say
Hmm.
you were calling people back then and say, "Hey, there's this great deal. It's 350." I bet you there was somebody who says, "Can I get it for 330?"
Well, here's
Yep.
what was kind of cool about this situation. My friend, I'm going to call her my deal finder. My friend gave me the seller who had 7 properties to sell. Okay. So she made 4 grand for helping. Okay. And we sold all the properties, 5 of them to the same buyer. I had met someone through a Craigslist post about these properties. He contacted me. He said, "Hey, my brother just made about $20 million selling a company in Silicon Valley, and he's ready to buy. I think he would take these." I said, "Okay, great." So I negotiated with the seller, I negotiated with the buyer, I worked into my fee, completely transparent with completely everybody. Boom, done. 40 days
Lovely.
from the time I got it under contract.
That's how it's done, right? And that's your task is to bridge these gaps, to serve that
And
seller.
and right, and to
And,
add value.
mm, oh,
But
immediately.
as a more creative thinking mind now, when I mean creative all over, but creative in real estate as well. Oh gosh, I would have begged, borrowed, and stealed,
Oh yeah.
and
Well, that's
stolen
that's where we can lean on
to
each
get that.
other, right? I
But
mean, think about this in theory, right? If you were to say, you know what, I need 40 grand to, for the 90/10 loan, right? Where we post 10% down, right? And you say, well, I ain't got 20. Dimitri, do you have 20? Oh, well, what do I get? Well, I could give you 10% return on your money. Like, well, what about half the profits on the deal? Right? Meaning that if you actually invested in it and went to
hmm
the full term and you shared in some of the fixes and we'll just share in the proceeds. No, well, more deals will get done, right? There'll be more transparency in our business,
sure,
and we can
sure.
and we can tackle more properties instead of saying, as Brian would say, Brian Tracy, I'd rather have 50% of 100 deals than 100% of three.
hmm
Right? So imagine that. Like, why are we following our teachers? We
Well, it's
listen to them, but then
interesting.
we don't do it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I think in my career, I've closed about 350 transactions, most of them residential and most of them virtual, where I did it from my house. Okay. But I didn't focus on the creative side of life to build up that mailbox money. But the thing that's really cool that I've experienced over that time is um, now when I go into every conversation, I want to know what they want first. And what a lot of these coaches and mentors and people on the internet teach is, you want to try and get the seller down as low as you possibly can, and whatever the case may be, but that a cash price may not serve them, right? So let me ask you this. Do you like, um, what's your favorite part of the interaction, whether it's with a podcast guest or a seller? What's your favorite part of it, of that whole
I
exchange?
think it's the aha moments. I think if it's like in our current conversation, right, where there's this aha moment, where you share the story of the seller and how you served them in their time of need. Like, boy, that's deep. That's so much deeper than any post could write, right? And if I didn't have this moment with you, I couldn't uncover and unearth such a beautiful story. Because on the surface, oh, you're doing what I'm doing but in a different market.
Hmm.
Right? Like, what I
Right,
mean? Like, white bread here, white bread there. No, no, no. There's some spice here. There's some variety. There's some multigrain going on. Like,
right,
no, there's some spice, and that leads to appreciating who you are more,
right.
right? And so that to me is like, now when I see you, meet with you in person, or have another episode, we're more connected. We understand each other a little more, right? And so next time you say, "Hey, why don't we do some work in Philly?" Well, now maybe I'm more likely to want to pursue that, right?
Okay.
As opposed to, yeah, 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 because everyone says let's do business together, but then it's like,
Right,
well, how? What's the
right.
next step? What does that actually
Mm,
look like? Because everything sounds great. Talk is cheap.
right.
We're here in Philly where people just, like I said, we love their cheesesteaks, but we also are kind of direct, and people kind of look at that and say, "Oh God, where's the love?" Oh no, there's love in that, but sometimes you need the truth, right? You need to face the facts. If someone is dealing with a roof that's collapsing, ignoring that maintenance is going to cost you more, and it's going to make that offer on your house go down. An empty house doesn't go up in value; in fact, it goes down. Unless by some luck or chance that you're in a rapidly developing area and that price goes up. Like that neighborhood you talked about. Was probably an emerging market that turned into a somewhat mature market within 5 or 10 years
Right.
because of the pace of development. Like meaning
Well,
that was probably an early adopter who picked it up for a song, and then other people started buying properties in that area, and then it got filled up and beautiful.
and it was even a specific buyer. What they benefited from is that Johns Hopkins Hospital started buying everything around their properties
Yeah.
and are still buying,
Yeah.
right? Apparently a lot of these hospitals have unlimited supplies of cash. I wonder where
Oh,
they get it.
well, the decades of Medicare and Medicaid fraud.
Yeah. Well, I hope not. But
The office of what is it called? DOGE, what's it called? The Department of Government Efficiency will soon
right,
uncover all this stuff. But until then, we still have the money. And the same thing
right.
with locally. University of Pennsylvania Health Center builds a $1.4 billion 3D robotic surgical center as a nonprofit organization, paying people a high salary on multiple levels, many who deserve it. But if we object to the system, object to this, what a nonprofit organization is, right?
Hmm.
And so it's kind of run like a business, but with the protections of the nonprofit. And
Sure.
and if you look at how our government's kind of mishandled money, I'd rather the private sector have it. I'd rather the health sector have it. And if they're able to kind of clean up communities around them, that's good.
Hmm.
Because you like, let's say West Philadelphia, University City, the areas around Penn, the areas around Drexel used to have such crime. Students who would come from around the world wouldn't be safe, and sometimes it'd be bad stories, and we don't want bad things to keep happening in Philadelphia.
Sure.
As Trump says, whether it be elections, the planes, issues, or even just people who celebrate too much after a Super Bowl. Like that,
Right.
that's a black eye on the city. I don't condone such behavior. I stayed inside while fireworks are going on outside. But, but tomorrow I'll be at the parade on Valentine's Day, and the Eagles get to celebrate. I'll be there with some friends, but I won't
That's
be,
good.
but I won't be climbing any poles, so you won't see me on
Yes.
Facebook.
Yeah. You've heard all sorts of crazy stories about that. So
Yeah,
flashing back to you,
sure,
um, do you have any stories? And I'm going to
sure,
open it up.
yeah.
Have you had any examples of how you served others, whether it's a seller or even a guest that
Um,
kind of stands out?
so the guest, I'll answer both. So the guest aspect, um, I feel like it's when someone says, "I've never been asked that before."
Nice.
Right? But not
Or
in
that,
I've never been asked that before, almost like
right,
offended, but more like, oh, you're really helping unlock my box. Or if I ask somebody who's of faith, like you, how does your faith drive you? Right? That's just a simple common question I like to ask people who I know are of faith.
right,
If someone has never identified their faith and only cares about finance, I'm not going to guess if they're a believer because they might
right,
say they are, and I don't know if I'll believe it.
right.
Right. And so I don't want to have that inauthentic nature in the show where it feels like, almost like a paid promotion. Even though no one pays to be on the show, I don't want it to feel forced. I don't want to feel like when is this conversation going to end? Like I said,
Sure.
here I have no time limits because it's just two friends talking. And
Right,
I bet you we've had a handful of conversations where you're like, oh gosh, if we hit the record button, imagine the thousands of people who would benefit from hearing this wisdom that we've
right,
shared so freely with each other. And the other thing is the seller situation. So, as I mentioned before, this was a property in the middle of the summer, August, and the seller needed to sell. They couldn't afford keeping it. They weren't able to fix it up. It was already a shell. It was actually starting to get condemned because it was starting to collapse. And the sooner they sell, the sooner you get something, right? That the person who buys it can either knock it down, build new, or fix it and stabilize it. But as I said, it was the middle of the summer, and all the buyers who I typically call were not answering, or if they did answer, they're not interested because I'm on vacation mode. I'm not coming back to town till whenever. Ugh. So what do? I keep calling. I have to serve that seller, right? And the time is closing, so I can't sit there and say, "Well, I couldn't get this deal done for you," and I didn't want to buy this one. I could
right.
have. I had the capability to. And all of us who are in this business cannot sit there and pretend that we're buying stuff. Like that's the 11th hour option. If I need to, I go get that loan and get that deal done because that's the burden I put on myself. I don't want to sit there and say, well, we tried and it didn't work out. Well, I thought you bought houses. Well, no, we try to buy houses unless somebody doesn't come through. Like, no, that's not the business model that I want to continue with. So I'm trying to make a little bit of money on this deal, like we all should, to provide a deal that when you buy this and you put a certain number in there, you get a certain number back, a healthy margin. Can I get 5,000? Can I get 10,000 on this deal? Not quite. In fact, nothing. I thought maybe one or two. No, nothing. Okay. Well, again, some wholesalers would sit there and say, yeah, that deal's not going to work, and then not serve the seller,
Right.
right? And then drop the contract and say, oh, well, no, we need to have a minimum amount because we spend so much on marketing. No, no, I know that. I spend it on marketing too. I have staff. I just hired someone today. Like this is extra cost that I'm going to have to incur as an investment in the business. So when I was able to sell that for break even, I know I did a great job. I made no money, but I did a great job. So like, and I imagine there's stories like that for you where the seller got to be served. I'm sitting there saying like, I'm happy for you. I am. I truly am. Like it would have been
Right.
nice to get paid, but oh well. Again, if this continues, I'm not in business anymore. Like
Right.
if this goes on and on forever, but occasionally, I want to serve the seller. Right now, I don't know if I could go in the hole much to help a seller, but I would definitely do it for no money. So I feel like I got to help that person move to their next step in life, move closer to their family, like enjoy whatever is going on in the future. And people get to that point of humility, and I think you've seen it with some sellers. Maybe in the past they would have been, oh, we demand this top dollar, and if it's not here, we're not happy. But now then things change, conditions change, circumstances change, and hey, you know what? If I just get this, I'm thrilled. God bless, I'm thrilled.
Right.
With my hands, move on, don't look back, right? And I feel like when I've been able to do that, that moves me. Or I own a property now where the seller made the terrible mistake of marrying the wrong person. Three generations owning this house, 57 years, right? And she married somebody. And she loved him so much that she added him to the deed. And then he went and killed somebody. That's not her fault, but he goes to jail. She drinks and continues drinking and stopped paying the bills, the electric bill, all the bills. Why? Because, maybe made a bad decision. Maybe, you shouldn't have married that person. Definitely shouldn't have added him to the deed. So when it was time to sell, at the closing table, when she's like, I can't believe you want half. She's not even talking to him. He's in jail. Talking to his brother, who has authority to sign for him. And we had to negotiate right there. So can you take a lower percentage? Because clearly you didn't really put anything in this. And it's going to some whatever fund. And they ended up lowering it to I got it down to 30%. So then the person says, this $86,000 is what is going to fund my retirement. I said, well, I wish it was more, but this is the most I could give you here. Right? And at least you get this. And it could have been less if they insisted on pushing for the half that they were
Right.
technically entitled to because they're on the deed. So this is a secret for everyone is just because you fall in love, protect your assets. Right? You never know what
Right.
you can control you, but you may not be able to control others. And
Yeah. And
people
that's
who are
why,
stable today go unstable tomorrow, and it happens.
yeah. And then some people are like, oh, well, prenuptial agreements and those kind of things. And it's like, well, wait a second. If they've built something amazing, and let's just do the math. If 50% of all marriages end in divorce, you know, I think 100% hopefully go in with good intentions. But chances are we're not going to make it, and if you think that signing this paperwork is going to doom us to failure, then let's not do it.
I when I went through a divorce a number of years ago, it was pretty brutal in that she had a really good strategist helping attorney, and they took a New Jersey form across the bridge to Pennsylvania and closed at a, a nationally renowned title company to sell my property, right? And it took 3 years of litigation, two different attorneys to recover 30% of what I bought the property for. And I
Mm,
never argued with my ex-wife for taking my property and selling it. All I said was, "Did you know that you could have sold it for twice that value? Like, meaning you sold this vacant lot in Point Breeze for 75 grand when it was clearly worth 150." Like, I didn't say, I had no emotion to it. She says,
right,
"Oh, I know." So, meaning you could have talked to me. You could have sold it for
yeah,
150. I could have got
right,
something. Then you would have gotten whatever you got anyway. Like, meaning this idea that you don't have to be
right.
in the secrets. You don't have to. You don't have to
Well,
be.
maybe that. Well, if she got that 70. Well, right. Wow.
Well, no, it was a big chunk, a big bite. That property is probably worth three now.
Hmm.
Building houses that are worth 7 or 8, right? So that
Right.
idea of what things are worth, even before others kind of accept it, right? That there's certain areas that are a quarter mile or 5 blocks from the it part of town. But let's say like in Philly, South Philly, Washington Avenue for the longest time was seen as the Berlin Wall. Do not cross that. Nothing comes below Washington Avenue. Oh God, but you're here in a graduate hospital named after a hospital that no longer exists. Like we have to update our names of neighborhoods. Back then, that neighborhood was comping great. Now, Point Breeze is comping great. Why? Because enough people like Ori and other developers took chances, built stuff, took existing houses, made them into condos, denser space, and people are willing to walk their dogs, open cafes on the corner, and do the same thing they did a few blocks north, now a few blocks south. Well, this is how you restore a city over time. But then again, like structurally, it's more than that. It's all of us taking this opportunity to speak as leaders. Hopefully, the young can watch us and say, you know what kind of career path do I want? Right? Maybe they're not suited for a 9 to 5 job. Maybe there aren't going to be too many 9 to 5 jobs in the future. So what can you do to create value for yourself? And that's to build your skill set. Starts with integrity. That's your foundation. Okay, you have to keep your word no matter what. Okay, and even if you can't hold what you promise, you have to stand up and say, "Look, I'm sorry. I tried this. It didn't work." No excuses, no reasoning behind it. When you do that, people will love you. They'll give you more and more chances to succeed. So if you're trying to sell something, if you're trying to skill up, I'm going to tell everyone in the audience, I know you can reach out to Tom anytime and say, hey, I need some career guidance. I don't know where I'm doing in my life. And I know that you would help someone just the same way I would. Or at least
Right.
even if it's for a few comments, knowing that that might be enough to kind of get them moving in the right direction. And we can't
Well,
solve everyone's problems, but at least we can solve some of them.
question. Hey, as we wind up here, what I wanted to ask you, with all the years of personal development, the podcast, the real estate, all of that together, what are some like your favorite philosophy or phrases or cliches that kind of encapsulate what you do and how you do it?
When I think of like, it won't fix itself, right? This situation won't fix itself. You know, we're not going to buy a scratch off tomorrow or buy the Powerball and it's going to hit and everything will be wonderful and hunky dory. You
Right.
know, we can't drown ourselves in our sorrows or cheap thrills or of avoiding things through distraction to face the facts of responsibility.
Hmm.
So when I see those who, you know, are slow to make change, sometimes they fall in these situations.
Right.
And so it's a cautionary tale for all of us that we could all fall into a poverty mindset if we're stuck. We don't
Sure.
ask for help, and I'm still guilty of it. I think there's probably all issues in our business and our development, in hiring and training that we're still figuring it out. And I think we have to give ourselves that grace to say, you know what, I am figuring it out. I've gone
Yeah,
so
yeah. I,
far.
I was talking to a 19-year-old yesterday, and his 20-year-old friend said, I need to figure out what I'm doing with my life. And I'm like, everyone's in a rush.
Oh
And
yeah,
and that's why we talked about the present. But I'm gonna wrap things up.
yeah.
Hey everyone, this episode 5, we had so much fun creating it, making it, sharing it with you. Please make sure you smash the like button and subscribe and share the channel with others. And you're gonna have information on how to possibly connect with Demetri in the description. Also going to be putting up our link to support our nonprofit. It's called People Giving a Hand Up, and as opposed to a handout, right? So thank you all for tuning in to episode number 5. And because Dimitri said it, it's going to happen. Each episode is going to be better, filled with more love, energy, and great content. Thank you all.
Thank you for having me on your show, Tom.